Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling, as you see what's going on a lovely island of Fawnhallow. That's not what was the A button. Today, where we'll be relaxing as per usual. I have noticed that I did not attach a thumbnail to today's Animal Crafts Treasure video, so I suppose at the same time as doing this, I'm going to be making sure I make the next thumbnails for the next. I normally do them in batches of 8, so up to 64. Currently, but yes, it's quite a late night episode today, mainly because it was a D&D session today. It was a pretty good one, I think. It was also, it started out a very, very relaxed one, and then there was some big sort of hard-hitting lore, I would say, in the last like half an hour or so. But good evening everyone, right now in Fawnhallow it's 11:30 PM on Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. Yeah, there's like it started out very sort of chilled, relaxed. It was almost like a sort of, I mean, it was a welcome break, I think, after the intensities, I suppose, of two sessions ago, where it was big fight, and then the session after, which was basically the sort of what occurred after the big fight. This one was sort of just like, you know, the first half was basically a shopping session, picking up all these sort of good things, but then the last part they met another NPC, and you know, they got a lot of information, which, you know, at very least one of my players, I think, has absorbed. It's a very interesting thing I was reflecting upon, or have been reflecting on, not only for a while, but I suppose more so after this session, is that obviously I'm playing with a group of friends, not a group of people who've come together in an express interest to play D&D the exact same way. So of course all my friends are rather different from each other and looking for a different thing, I suppose, which they'll find entertaining. And it makes me reflect, because it's been a pretty difficult balance, I think, over the past year and a bit, to make sure that people get to engage with things which they find fun or enjoyable. You know, like some people in the campaign not only care about combat, but find the combat most fun, most exhilarating, feeling strong, testing things out, being powerful, hitting big numbers. Some people find it fun to, you know, roleplay as their character, you know, talk in their character, think of a way, make bad decisions, good decisions in their character. And some, you know, like to sort of know about the lore, make theories, investigate, understand what's going on. And it's all rather difficult to get a balance, because I suppose, fortunately or unfortunately, these people are spread across the two campaigns I'm doing. Like the people who like to act as a character, and I would say there's one in each campaign, and maybe two in one of the campaigns. But you know, the one who is an instigator is separated from one who's kind of like there from one who's kind of like just there to see what's happened. It's cool, going with flow, separated in one who, I don't know, wants to XYZ up. It's interesting. And I think it tends to be most apparent. Like, obviously we're all friends, so we're all, you know, understand that this is the compromise. We're all, you know, there's all a bit of a give and take. D&D is made up of multiple pillars. It's not just a storytelling aspect, it's also, you know, the RPG element to it as well, which all interweaves together. That's how it becomes one sort of package, because it can kind of, in a very nice sort of generous light, it kind of does everything. It doesn't, you know, focus on everything, like it doesn't max out, like it isn't like an amazing role-playing system, or isn't like a top-tier strategic battle system or anything like that. But it does both of them well enough, and marries the two systems well enough that people can enjoy it generally, which is I think why it's so popular in the end. It ends up being quite a sort of a jack of all trades sort of thing. But it does pose a very interesting challenge for me as a DM to be like, well, how can I make sure that everyone sort of gets their fill? How do I make sure that people who want battles get battles? Or to actually, you know, have fun in, you know, I know myself, I'm very sort of biased towards both laws and characters and that sort of thing. But how can I make sure that that doesn't just completely take over the entire thing in the end? How do I make sure that RP can be a strong enough element that it doesn't bore people who don't like combat? How do I make sure that combat can be engaging enough? in a way, or they can have enough investment through the storytelling aspect? The answer is, I don't really know, to be honest. I'm not Matt Mercer. And at the same time, none of my players ever plays in Critical Role. So we're all just sort of trying to figure it out. And at core of it, I don't think it really matters, because I think everyone's having a fun time, to be honest. But it does pose interesting things here and there, when there's like specifically one of the pillars are focused on in one of the sessions. In an ideal world, it would be like there could be equal balance throughout all things, but that's not exactly possible. Well, really impossible. By the nature of that, I have written this overarching story to incorporate all the pillars to certain degrees, and it's pretty impossible, I think, to have an even distribution throughout every single session, mainly because, again, I'm not in control of the entire session. I don't know necessarily what my players would do. But yes, there's been some big, heavy lore information that's been going on, where players are definitely getting to the level where it's becoming difficult, not to hide things from them, but like they can actually start solving problems which they couldn't solve before. Like, for example, in this campaign, one of the warlock now has access to scrying, and because warlocks can get their spell slots back on a short rest, they realised as a group that, like, hey, we can just scry, 2 things and then have a short rest, and then scry 2 more things. It's like continuously. Obviously, not all of them are going to work, because we're not going to be able to get through all of them. Saves might be made, etc., etc. But it would still be pretty useful. Excuse me, I was just having a sneezing fit. And that definitely poses challenges as me for a DM, because I'm just like, well, I don't want it to just be like, hey, here's an immediate answer to whatever they were trying to investigate before. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't want to deprive them of being like, well, you took the spell and I'm just going to counter it by not giving you any information from it. So I think I did like a reasonable balance in between. I don't know if everything I said got picked up on, but it is definitely a difficult thing, I think, as a DM to deal with scry. It's very much like sort of like, well, now I need to sort of think on the fly exactly like what would make sense, where would this person be, what can I say, because obviously I don't want to give everything away, because then it's just a bit unrewarding being like, oh, that overarching mystery which you may or may not have been invested in, well, you solved it, good job. But at the same time, I'm like, I want to make sure I reward you. You've made that choice to take this spell. I'm not gonna like be like, no, you don't get to use that spell. That's something you don't get to engage in, because that's not fun. You made the strategic choice to make that spell, to make that choice to take that spell. So of course, by now, that you'll start to see the consequences, that you start to reap it. And I mean, they're basically at the end of Act 2. I think both groups now, I would say, are softly in the transition period from Act 2 to Act 3, kind of. It feels a bit more weird because it doesn't feel like there's a definitive end, but it does feel like there's a definitive, like, this was a big milestone that they've all reached. The other group, I think, will probably hit it in this Friday session, and I am looking forward to that because I don't exactly know what's going to go on. I still need to respond to my friends in the channel. I've just had like no time to respond to anything. I know there's been things which have been asked of me in my own Discord server, which I've also not really had the time to sort of sit down and like read it and respond. I mean, considering that like half my days essentially are basically, work, come back from work, immediately do an activity which spends up most of the day, and then do recording. It's kind of like, I think hopefully you can forgive me for that. But yeah, it's a difficult balance, I think, to get all these pillars balanced. I mean, in an ideal world, I suppose the easiest way would be you just have people who want similar things from a campaign in the same campaign. So then I would run like a lore-based mystery intrigue campaign with a lot of things full of roleplay, and then run a campaign which is just like poor, action movie style, never stop blowing off, or have combat like every other session or something. It'll be big, explosive, don't think about the lore too much, it'll just be enough lore to keep things moving, but not to the extent where anything feels like it necessarily needs to be bogged down by it. If you don't want to engage with it, that's fine. You don't have to. That's kind of how I feel like it would be the easiest, but that is not the reality we live in. Reality we live in is it's a mixed group of what people want, and that's A-okay in my book. But yeah, the different pillars of a game. I mean, I suppose it's kind of like what they warn you against doing in video game design, right? Being like, don't try and put all your eggs in all the baskets, which is, I guess, literally what I'm trying to do with these D&D campaigns. And I think that's fine, because I think you can with D&D. You sort of just like dip your toes in a little bit of everything. Certainly I don't think I'm doing as much of the exploration aspect. It's more like narrative exploration rather than literal exploration, but I'll be honest, I don't really know how to do exploration properly in D&D. Only to a certain degree. Well, the thing is, to me, that nature of exploration is really, really quite difficult because there's so many different things that you would have to basically prep for to make it work out. And I'm like, that's not feasible. I can't prep like everything which may or may not appear in a town. So yeah, I don't really. Lore is easy to prep for, I think, mainly because I'm more interested in it. I think combat's actually not as bad to prep for because I don't do it maybe as often as I could, would, should, I don't know. But they're all concentrated together, so it's more like I can think of overarching mechanics which may apply to this battle and make it interesting in that sense. But yeah. Pillars of TTRPGs. Reminds me that there is like the player type things that the D&D thing has. Let's see. D&D types of players. Let's see if I can try and label my own friends, my own players as what they are. What is it? Actor, explorer, instigator, power gamer, slayer. Storyteller, thinker, watcher. So I think one of my groups is probably, it's hard to say, maybe like an actor, storyteller and a watcher. And the other one would be an instigator, a watcher, an actor, and I don't think explorer is quite right. It's hard to say. Slayer, maybe? No, I don't think so. I don't know if we have maybe a thinker. Yeah, I think maybe a thinker. I don't think we have a power gamer, and I don't think we have a slayer necessarily. I mean, obviously these are just sort of metrics, and they're not like... I'm sure you can be like part power gamer, part instigator, part actor, or whatever. I'd say there's maybe other main ones. Main columns. Which kind of works, kind of doesn't, I don't know. What am I? I'm pretty sure I'm a storyteller. Storyteller, and maybe in some ways I'd be actor or thinker, is my guess. Or explorer, maybe, I don't know. No, I think I'm very storyteller motivated. You see a plot hook and I'm like, okay, I can see that plot hook you're putting down, DM. I'm gonna make it come to fruition. I'll ask a leading question. I'll guide the things into it. But yeah. I don't know. I don't really know what the best way to do it is, to be honest. I don't know if there is an optimal balance to be had. If I was an absolute DM machine, maybe I would just DM multiple campaigns which focus on different things. But I'm not. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, it's pretty difficult already DMing 2 campaigns. Twice weekly. So, I'm not going to put even more things on my plate, to be honest. But it's interesting to think about, I think. Or what ends up being a feasible way to run or not run things. Anyway, I was thinking about it mostly because like 2 of my players, and then at the end another one of the players was being like starting to lose it, not like crash out, lose it, but like sort of like, oh, I'm no longer following kind of like what's going on, what we're talking about anymore with regards to the plot. The lower base discussions, and I think that's 100% okay. I was like, that's totally fair. There's a lot going on, but to me the important part is that as long as I'm doing it for someone, and in this case I was doing it for one of the players who she said she has a lot of theories, and I'm like, you absolutely had to tell me whatever theories you have in your mind. I want to hear them. That's the most rewarding part, I think, as a DM, is knowing that people are engaged in one way or another to the story or to the thing that you're trying to create. That might be like an ambiguous way to put it, but it's so true. Like if you're a DM who loves creating these combat encounters, having your players probably at the table discussing what the best strategy is super rewarding. Creating all this lore, having players come up with theories, being like, I think it might be like this, I think it might be like this, let's try this. That is super rewarding. I guess it shouldn't really come as a surprise, to be honest, but engaging with the things that you create is a rewarding portion of it. So that's why I was just like, if you have theories, absolutely tell them, like, list them out. I'll read it, and I might not be able to say anything in response to it, or, you know, critique it or anything, or say how accurate you are, but I absolutely would adore reading it and understanding what you interpret the story as. But yes, the pillars of any game. Tabletop pillars, maybe that's what I'll call it. That makes it sound like more of a physical object though, but yeah, it's difficult. It's delicate balance. Am I getting it right? I don't know if I'm getting it right per se, but I'm getting it right enough, I think. That I think my players are having fun and engaged to a certain degree. I think it's hard, you know, obviously in this session it was a bit difficult to be like, well, obviously no matter what, this latter part is going to be very, very lore heavy. I think probably what I could have done in retrospect is like, maybe I could have summarized things here and there. Just to be like, instead of an NPC says this, just be like, she talks about how magic works in this way or something. But at the same time, I'm like, I want it to be rewarding in the sense that if you put together the pieces which are being hinted towards, then you should be rewarded for that. You know, it is a puzzle. Like, there is a lot of information I've given, which can be put together to get answers earlier than they would have found out about them. And as one of my players has, I think, best described it, is like, I understand a lot of like the consequences and things which have happened, but I don't understand the motivation, which makes it hard to sort of work backwards towards a route. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. Like, that is, I don't know if it's like a cheat sheet of way of writing a mystery, but it's what I've definitely been using as like a crutch to write the mysteries of what's going on, is basically being like, okay, you can observe what's happening, and it's easy to observe exactly what's happening. But the harder question is for answering the why is this happening. And there might not necessarily be a good answer for it. It may be hidden, it may be obfuscated behind many, many different layers. And if so, that's kind of a point. It's meant to be difficult to find out exactly what's going on. But yeah. Where was I going with this? I'm not sure. The long and short is, I'm also playing a clicking minigame right now on shiny colours, which is why I'm doing this, but you might hear just me continuously clicking, but that in itself is what makes it interesting, I think. It's a lot easier to give you consequences and then be like, alright, now what's the reason? And then slowly but surely, as they progress through the story, they work backwards towards the main reasoning. Like, I mean, one thing which is happening, which both parties, I think, are aware of, is like, there's a lot of demon attacks, and there's some undead attacks going on. Why is it happening? Don't know, but it's easy to observe it's happening, and that gives us sort of like setting in motion for the early game motivations. But now they're sort of hopefully entrenched in the lore of what could be happening. Now they just need to sort of confirm it in a way. I think a difficult part is what I'm finding now. It's like it's hard to find a balance between, I don't want to railroad my players, because I do want to be like, hey, I've given you a lot of information. It's obviously quite freeform how you go about using that information to solve it, to solve whatever's going on, or to apply it. I don't want to always be like, hey, go to this person, hey, go to this person. That may be like a fair way to run a campaign, but I don't think that's the campaign I want to run. As I said, I want it to be a collaborative storytelling effort, so I want my players to be able to direct some things, being like, hey, we're going to do this. I'm going to be like, I'll give you the settings, I'll give you the actors, and I'll give you the setting that, and then I'll give you stage directions, but, you know, you write the script, kind of. I don't know, I'm just sort of spewing out random nonsense that is to do with DMing. But yeah, the pillars of D&D, and the types of players that you have, makes it an intricate balance to get right, but I think it's all underpinned by the fact that we're friends, so we're all willing, you know, to understand and compromise, and at the end of the day, it's a fun time with friends, so how can that really go wrong? Anyway, I'm going to wrap this episode off here, so if you haven't watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell, so until next time, bye bye for now.